What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, April 5th, 2017, middle of the week, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday. And another weekend of utter insanity coming out of our government. Boy, I have to tell you, I'm very disappointed. My political efforts last year were geared toward getting Hillary Clinton out of the race more than getting Trump in. But I sort of had this belief, if you will, suspicion, hope that Trump's victory might actually change the course of this nation for the better, and it's clearly not happening. And so we're definitely headed to either World War III or a collapse, and it's an even money bet which one is going to hit first here. All right, we got a lot of stuff to talk about today. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, at this point, we're beginning to see the backflash from all of this Russia-gate nonsense that Hillary's camp, where we're dishing onto Donald Trump all during the campaign, after the campaign, Russia hacked the election. All of it has been exposed as a complete falsehood. There was no evidence to back it up, and that has now put the corporate media in a bit of a bind because they're out there now trying to somehow make this spying on the Trump campaign go away, even though there is increasing amounts of evidence coming out every single day that it did in fact happen. And this could really be a major blow to what remains of the credibility of the corporate media. In fact, I had a listener actually sent me this page from their local newspaper that had a fold-out flap about why you can still trust our newspaper. We're working hard to bring you the truth. You know, to pay no attention to those other people who say that, you know, the corporate media has shirked its responsibility to the public. And it's a sign of desperation in the corporate media because obviously anybody actually reading this little insert still trusts that newspaper enough to be buying the newspaper. But it really is an issue where the corporate media is now outed for all the things they've been doing. And they will not accept responsibility for the fact that they sold out their journalistic integrity. So they're going to turn around and put the blame on those of us who are trying to tell the truth. Same thing from the political class. It's okay for them to commit these crimes. It's just wrong if you report on them. So whether you call it hoisting with your own petard or the boomerang effect, Russiagate has now turned into Spygate, and it's blowing up in the Democrats' faces because of the obvious double standards and hypocrisies here. And the liberals are out there saying, oh, there's nothing to any of this. It's going to go away. You know, nobody's going to be arrested. Nobody's going to be charged. It's all a lot of nonsense. And we will see, because there is a level of outrage that once the American people reach that, the political pressure to actually do something and change something is going to be irresistible. Right now, the federal government is actually much more fragile than they would like you to think because of that lack of support, that lack of trust, that lack of belief, the economic hardships. They're overstrained in all these wars and yet crazy enough to try and start two more. The American people just abandoning them, just saying, we're not going to listen to you anymore. You're not my government anymore. They couldn't survive that. All right, we're going to take a phone call from Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Yeah, I'm a Democrat. I voted for Obama, unfortunately, because, I fell for his hope and change. And, I voted for Trump because I'm tired of the lies, But I think he's been captured, Mike. I don't like Pence. I think he's a stiff and establishment. But Nikki Haley, Mike, today at the UN just did it for me, man. I just had it with these people. We're going to take unilateral action against the Syrian.
And this is the third time
everybody keeps falling for this joke. It's a joke. How can you keep falling for the same
Well, we're not falling for it, obviously. We know it's another lie, but apparently the government is no longer concerned if the American people know it's lies or not. They're simply going to say, this is our position and we are going to act on it. It's like that nonsense about we refuse to recognize Crimea's right to secede, therefore by default Russia stole Crimea. And it is a lot of nonsense. And this is the third time they tried this same thing. Assad gassed his own people because they tried it back in 2013 and 2014, and both times it was exposed as a lie. And they're back here doing the same thing again. And you're right, Trump has either been captured or, I'm sorry, he's an idiot. If he actually believes that Assad gassed his own people just days after the Trump administration signaled their willingness to allow Assad to continue as president. It simply does not make any sense. And if Trump is actually believing this, as opposed to simply going along with the propaganda, then I'm sorry, he's an idiot. He's not as smart as I hoped he was going to be.
And there's something going on here now because they're moving something, a plan or something, because they really want to get Assad out. So there is obviously a reason that they're trying to push forward really quick.
Well, the reason
to get Assad out.
The reason is the Syrian and Russian forces have all but eradicated the U.S.-backed rebels from Syria. And at this point, it's either gin up an all-out invasion or admit defeat. And maybe that's why Trump is going along with this, because he doesn't want to start his administration with the first military defeat since Vietnam on his record.
The problem is the Russians are not leaving Syria. They're not going to leave. That means we'll have a conflict with the Russians because it's a strategic point for the Russians, and they're not leaving. And I don't understand, because if nobody wants a black flag of ISIS flying over Syria, right? Because they'll be moving all their people into Europe. But obviously, Europe don't care.
Oh, Europe does care.
No, they don't care.
The people of Europe care. The people of Europe care greatly. I mean, the opposition to all of this refugee nonsense is building. It's only their politicians who've been bought by the globalists that are still saying, oh, no, we can have open borders. We can have all of this. It's all working out great. After all, you're not seeing any story in the newspaper about any problems with the refugees, and that's because the governments, especially Germany, have ordered their media not to report on all of this stuff.
And you noticed Boris Johnson, Bojo the clown, I think they, I forgot who called him Bojo, but he said the same thing. Nikki Haley said, that barbarian Assad. They use the same script. They don't even change the script. That's how lazy they are with this whole thing. They don't care about the people here. They don't care about the Syrian people. They just want to get Assad out and put a puppet in. Yeah,
well, that's it. And they're apparently, they're literally betting the farm that Russia's going to back down, and Russia's not going to back down. First of all, Russia has updated and modernized its military. It is back to the force strength of the former Soviet Union, especially in naval assets. And meanwhile, of course, the whole world understands that America's latest generation of weapons is all overpriced junk. And it's just insanity. But they all seem to be caught up in this groupthink, or maybe there's something in the water of Washington, D.C., or maybe they're all taking way too many prescription antidepressants. But the quality of thinking has not improved under the Trump administration. Okay, we're hearing some strange, loud noises here.
Yeah, Putin's not going to back down. Syria, that's his red line, and I dare anybody to cross him. I dare him.
Well, this is going to get really, really ugly. All right, well, listen, Dustin, I'm going to let you go. We're going to be talking a lot more about Syria and this nonsense about a chemical attack a little bit later in the show.
Hey, Mike, can I just mention one more thing real quick before I go? I just want to let people know in Yemen, there's a sniper that's been accredited with 119 Saudi kills.
Oh, good. Good shooting.
Yeah. So, all right, thanks, Mike.
All right, we're going to let you go here and get on back to the news. Now then, let's get on over to Russiagate. Then we're going to get back to the spying. First of all, we're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. We have been spending a little bit of time talking about this so-called cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike, which has had to retract portions of their report supporting their allegations of Russian cyber attacks against the DNC servers. And other cybersecurity people are looking at CrowdStrike's work in regard to Russia's alleged hacking of the Ukrainian military, and they're saying it's poor quality work. They shouldn't even be calling themselves a cybersecurity firm. Maybe they're actually something else, and that's their cover. But apparently they are refusing to cooperate with Congress. Congress wants to talk to them about how they came about, to claim that Moscow was hacking the election, and CrowdStrike they're just not there. They're refusing to cooperate. Obviously got something to hide there. So, getting on behind Russiagate, what we're starting to see is Russiagate was a cover for Obama's Stasi state. In other words, they used the claim that Russia was interfering with our internal politics to get the intelligence agencies, or to justify the intelligence agencies spying on people. They spied on Donald Trump. They spied on Sean Hannity. They spied on Eric Prince. They probably spied on all of the other presidential candidates last year, all under the excuse of, we think Russia's trying to influence them, and by the way, can we have all the stuff that you caught on the American side of the intercepts? And, of course, the corporate media is just still pushing on this story. It's just like when Susan Rice was being interviewed on MSNBC, and she was asked, are you going to testify to Congress? And she immediately turns around and says, no, we got to put the focus back on Russia. Russia bad, Russia bad, Russia bad. And they're desperate to keep the focus over on this Russia story, even though we all know there's no basis for it. It is a crock of poo. And it stinks to high heaven. And behind it, we're finding out that Obama had set up this massive intelligence system that was spying on people illegally. Remember, Maxine Waters did a TV interview a while back in which she said, Obama has a database on everybody. So, it's out there. And the Democrats are joining ranks. They're absolutely denying this thing out of party loyalty. They're not being objective. They're not willing to look at the fact that their leaders may have committed crimes. It's tribal thinking is what's going on. Now, President Trump has finally started talking publicly about the Susan Rice scandal, saying that he believes she committed a crime. Now, the Democrats are saying that Rice did not do anything wrong, even if she did unmask citizens, even if she was spying, that technically it was legal, she didn't mean to do wrong. And don't forget, just last month, Susan Rice claimed she knew nothing about the claims made by Chairman Nunes, and that's already been exposed as a lie. So we already know she's lying. We already know she's lying. And Trump isn't buying it. I'm not buying it. And Trump was, during the photo op with King Abdullah of Jordan, the media said, what about the Susan Rice controversy? And Trump came on out and said, it's one of the big stories of our time. And on that, he's absolutely correct. And then he was asked, do you think Susan Rice's behavior constituted a crime? And Trump said, yes. And he's right on that one as well. As Judge Napolitano has pointed out, the revelation of classified information for political purposes is a felony. So, there we are here right now. Now, according to Representative Thomas Massey, more information is already starting to surface about Susan Rice and this spying operation. He's saying there's more out there than has been revealed. And he's out there saying, you know, we have to fix this. We have to fix this. Because, you know, people are supposed to be protected by that Fourth Amendment, or at least that's the theory here. Now, the Wall Street Journal has broken the story. I'm glad the corporate media has been forced to deal with this, because this is a major, major story in the independent media. So they're being forced to confront and deal with this. The Wall Street Journal broke the story that Susan Rice was not acting alone in this surveillance and unmasking of the Trump team. Now, they haven't named the other players, But if Obama was hoping to just pin this all on Susan Rice went rogue and she did it all by herself and we're going to throw her under the bus, it's not going to work. Because the Wall Street Journal is already saying there were a number of people involved in this. And I can't wait for them to start throwing each other under the bus to save their own sorry rear ends. In fact, we're probably going to have to get the bus with the really big tires on it. Story coming out of 12160. Nunez disclosures may signal a Watergate-level scandal. Gee, you think? Yeah, of course it is. Of course it is. We're seeing exactly the same thing again. Illegal bugging for political gain. It doesn't get simpler than that. Story coming out of American Free Press. Obama's NSA intel gathering on Trump aides tremendous abuse of the system. Yes, it is, and that was something that we raised when we first learned about this incredible surveillance system. That it could be abused, that we had historical precedents for it being abused. That the people who are in charge of all this data are in a position to impose their will on politicians. I mean, when you look at how politicians are behaving, whether it's pedophilia, drugs, prostitutes, whatever it is they're doing, the surveillance state gets it, and they can use it to control the politicians and bypass democracy. Now, Trump right now is facing a clear choice, black and white. Is he going to stand up to the surveillance state and try and stop it, which carries risks, or is he just going to roll over and say, well, that's just the way life is in the United States of America, which will condemn this country to a covert dictatorship forever until it collapses? Because what we're seeing right now is the elections don't matter anymore. The campaign promises don't matter anymore. We have a hidden government that rules through blackmail. And it gets the information through this embedded surveillance system in all of our lives. Now, Mitch McConnell is supporting the Senate Intelligence Committee investigation of Susan Rice. She's now a target for investigation herself. And McConnell was saying he's hoping that this is going to be a bipartisan basis. Fat chance of that. The Democrats are going to fight this every step of the way. Because they're absolutely convinced that only Republicans could have a Richard Nixon. We're Democrats, we're liberals, we're good. We would never do something like that. We have evidence they did it. Oh, evidence, don't give me evidence. Now, Ann Coulter is saying that it's not enough to get Susan Rice to testify under oath before the House Intelligence Committee. It's time to put Obama under oath and ask him. And she's right about that. I'm at the point of taking back all the comments I made about her saying radiation was good for you. Now, Lindsey Graham is out there reminding everybody of Susan Rice's background, which is not very good, because she has a history of political manipulation of security intelligence. Remember, she was right there at the forefront of telling Americans that the attack on the consulate in Benghazi was a response by the mob to a movie, which turned out not to exist at all. So she cannot be trusted. She should not be trusted. In fact, I don't think there's hardly anybody in government that you should automatically trust. The last two that we had that I did trust was Cynthia McKinney and Dr. Ron Paul. Another article coming on out here, Investment Watch blog. How long can the media pretend that Rice didn't unmask Team Trump for political reasons on the orders of Obama? They're still trying to make it look like it was okay for Rice to be doing this. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And the corporate media, they're being forced to confront this scandal. And it is rather amazing. Anybody goes to journalism school, they dream of stumbling across a story on the scale of Watergate. And here is one dumped right in their laps. and they're being told, ignore it, pretend it didn't happen. We've got to protect the liberal establishment. We've got to protect the whole establishment. We can't suffer another scandal that might delegitimize the government. Well, the government's already illegitimate, I think, in the eyes of the most Americans at this point. Now the corporate media is out there attacking anybody talking about the Susan Rice scandal, saying they're not only being racist but sexist as well. They're only interested in this story because Susan Rice is a black woman. If she was a white man, they would just not be caring about this story. Talk about pathetic. Talk about desperation on the cusp of madness. And the media is now trying to put the focus back on Russiagate, and they're trying to basically cast suspicion on anybody who's not towing the line. And over on Huffington Post, they literally ran this story. 1,000 paid Russian trolls spread fake news on Hillary Clinton, Senate intelligence heads told. A former FBI agent testified that President Donald Trump helped spread fake news by embracing the stories against his opponents. Now, you need to understand there's a tremendous difference between the House Intelligence Committee and the Senate Intelligence Committee. The House Intelligence Committee is being run by Trey Gowdy. Over on the Senate side, they are very clearly on the side of protecting the Obama administration and the liberals. They're over there saying they're still going to talk to CrowdStrike, and you know they're accepting rumor and innuendo and all this stuff. It's a hatchet job, and the two committees right now are definitely going to come to diametrically opposed conclusions on this. But they're already out there trying to say that anybody who carried a story critical of Hillary Clinton was a Russian stooge. Now they're saying we were paid. I don't think so. I never got a check at any rate. And again, they're just declaring all the stories about Hillary Clinton to be fake, even though they were all sourced. Travelgate was real. Cattlegate was real. Chinagate was real. All of these things really did happen. They were not fake news. And under that First Amendment, we had a right to report it. Nobody ever came on back and said, I can prove that story is false. Now, again, over in the U.S. Senate, Senator Jeanne Shaheen, Democrat from New Hampshire, is introducing a new bill into the Senate that will label Russia Today and Sputnik News as propaganda, which will open the door to government censorship. Senator Shaheen is claiming Russia Today has violated the Foreign Agents Registration Act, which was passed in response to concerns about Nazi propaganda being disseminated in the United States without the people knowing what it was. Well, if you're going to start enforcing the Foreign Agents Registration Act, let's start with AIPAC, which has never registered as a foreign agent, even though that is very clearly what they are. Now, another story coming out of Sputnik News, and this is why they're so angry about it. Sputnik News is reporting that there are U.S. senators who have asked Secretary of State Rex Tillerson to investigate the use of tax dollars to support left-wing causes in places like Macedonia, Albania, Latin America, and Africa. And the way that came about is George Soros has been in all these countries supporting these regime change movements, and it turns out he and his organizations were being given funds from the State Department under the Obama administration. So they're using your tax dollars to bring down these other governments, to take down legally elected legitimate governments and replace them with puppet rulers. And it's time for an investigation into that. Now we're going to take another break for commercials. When we come on back, some new developments in the IRS scandal. And aloha America, welcome back to the show here. Now, earlier this week, Judicial Watch started releasing documents obtained under a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit regarding the IRS targeting of conservative groups and political enemies. One of the documents that they have released, according to a story that we have out of Investment Watch Blog. One of the documents confirms the orders to target and destroy conservative organizations came from the Obama White House itself. Now, remember when this scandal first broke and Obama got up on TV and said, I only heard about it on the TV news. You know, I'm not guilty. I'm just a dummy. Yep, 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 yep. Well, he was lying. No big surprise there. And remember, use of the IRS against enemies, that was going to be one of the articles of impeachment against Richard Nixon. But he resigned on the obstruction charge, because the last thing anybody in Washington wanted was an actual trial where somebody was sooner or later was going to ask, why did you bother breaking into the Watergate when Nixon was so far ahead in the polls against McGovern? And that answer would have traced back to the Kennedy assassination, and nobody wanted that one to come out. That's why they got rid of Spiro T. Agnew and they put in Gerald Ford as the VP to take over when Nixon stepped down or was removed from office, because Gerald Ford was on the Warren Commission. He would protect the big, deep, dark secret. So, we now know that Obama was, in fact, directing the IRS to go after his enemies. And apparently, Judicial Watch has released other documents showing that this targeting by the IRS was much more expansive than previously known. And it even has IRS officials admitting that the tactics they were using to hinder conservative groups were inappropriate. Now, these documents were previously withheld by the Obama administration from Congress and were not included into the congressional investigation into IRS abuse. And remember the result of the investigation? Well, we can't find that anybody did anything wrong, so everybody gets to go home. And the fact of the cover-up was obvious for everybody. Remember Lois Lerner's hard drive? Oh, my goodness, the hard drive broke. We lost all the paperwork there. What about the backup system? Well, you know, we fired the backup company a couple of weeks ago. Golly gee. These things happen. Just trying to save some money. All right, so let's get on to this story about Syria. And certainly, as far as the Internet and the independent media is concerned, everybody knows this is a repeat of the same lies they used to try and justify an invasion of Syria back in 2013 and 2014, which were exposed as lies by institutions like the United Nations, Chemical Weapons Inspectors, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And it never made any sense anyway. And they're desperate enough to try the same thing all over again. Apparently, they are absolutely convinced that the American people have very short memories, and we don't remember all the times that we have been lied to get us to go along with the war. And right now, I think the U.S. is in a corner. The Syrian military and Russia have all but won that war. And maybe Donald Trump decided he was going to go along with this because he didn't want to have his legacy include the first military defeat since Vietnam, which is a stupid reason to kill all those people, but who knows? I'm a little surprised. I'm having a hard time thinking that he actually believes this nonsense. If he does, he's an idiot. I'm sorry. So, Nikki Haley was up there at the United Nations Security Council saying, you must authorize us to go on in and get Assad. And the usual co-conspirators, Israel and Britain, were out there saying, oh yes, time to get Assad. We got to get Assad out there. Now, Russia, of course, stood up and said, we don't know what happened. In fact, what we think happened, and I think Russia didn't say it's a false flag, even though that's what it looks like to me. Russia is saying that Syrian warplanes bombed a rebel chemical depot, and that's what released the chemical weapons. Because we know the rebels have chemical weapons. They've been using them. But Russia's point is we don't really know. There's no evidence. The only claim that it was Russia or Syria came from the white helmets, who, by the way, photos are showing them handling the bodies of these supposed chemical weapon victims without even wearing gloves. And that's a red flag warning that that whole thing was staged anyway. But the white helmets are known to be a propaganda front serving U.S. interests. And they were claiming that they know it couldn't be the rebels because the attack came from warplanes, either Russia or Syria. Now, witnesses on the ground who are not part of the white helmets are saying there were no warplanes, that the chemical weapons were lobbed in from nearby. But they're back there calling for the regime change. And we need to go back and look at the history here. First of all, the U.S. first attempt to justify invading Syria was the claim that Assad had chemical weapons. Not that he was using them. He's got them. And that's enough for us to go. And after all, we could go into Iraq because he had nuclear weapons. Well, he didn't actually have nuclear weapons, but we thought he had nuclear weapons, and that's enough for us to go on in. And, of course, Putin came on in and brokered this deal where Assad surrendered all his chemical weapons because Assad really didn't want to have them or use them anyway. And they got rid of all the weapons in 2013. It was under international inspections. They went in and verified. Assad turned over all of his chemical weapons. They were destroyed. And then all of a sudden the U.S. comes out and says, oh, yes, Assad kept some of his chemical weapons. He's gassing his own people. And it never made any sense. Why would Assad do something like that, knowing it would give the United States an excuse to invade? And that also applies to the second time they accused him of using gas on his own people in 2014. And it applies today. Why would Assad do this, knowing it's going to reverse U.S. policy and open the door to an invasion? Remember when one of these gas attacks happened right in front of the UN chemical weapons inspectors on the very day they arrived in Syria? And nobody could answer a question. Why would Assad do something that stupid? Use a banned chemical weapon on his own Alawite supporters. Those were people who were on Assad's side. Right in front of the chemical weapons inspectors on the day they arrived. Nobody could come up with a reason for Assad to do something like that. And that story fell apart. And the same thing applies today. Nobody can come up with a motive for Assad to do something like this. We're just supposed to take it on faith from the government and from the media that, oh yes, Assad did this. We must invade. Please send your children to enlist in the military right now. And the really dangerous part is that even though the Security Council rejected the resolution proposed by the U.S., Nikki Haley's up there saying, well, we feel compelled to take our own action. We're going to go to war on Syria. We know Assad is bad. So they're getting ready to crank up a war in Syria. Like we don't have enough problems with the wars we're already stuck in and cannot get out of. And it looks like the U.S. was planning to do something to escalate the war, to regain the initiative, because apparently they've already started expanding the runway at an air base in northern Syria to accommodate the C-17 aircraft. So it looks like this has actually been in the planning stages for a while now. All right, we're going to take some phone calls here. John in Chicago, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I just got this really scary suspicion that, all these narratives are falling apart. You know, if Russia was friends with Trump and they put him in, what's happening now? They put it in front of Trump with the Syria attack, going, you must deal with Syria now. And when he got up there today in his presser with the King of Jordan, he said Assad did it. Came out of Trump's own mouth.
Yeah, I know.
That's awful. But, Marco Rubio even said that because Putin is backing Assad, by extension, he's guilty of war crimes for the chemical attack. Who's telling? So the narrative was Hillary would take us into war with Russia. What are the Republicans pushing? I think the Pentagon is running the military. Trump has no say in the matter. And if Trump doesn't do what the neocons want him to do, they will get rid of him. They'll find a way to put Pence in power, and I don't think the Democrats would have a problem with it. I honestly think, I'll make a bold prediction, I think they'll get Gorsuch in through the nuclear option, which will help the Democrats way down the line. They'll get the health care thing done because Pence is out there getting all the votes. He's getting it done. And then Trump is gone. And I don't think any of the Democrats could care less. If Pence is in there, they're going to get their wars.
Yeah, unfortunately, the war hawks are really pushing forward, and I think the groupthink in Washington, D.C. Is very much that without a major war, the United States is going to collapse because we've lost our manufacturing. It's been in decline for decades. Nobody wants to buy American products anymore because they're kludgy, bloated, way too expensive, got way too many cautionary stickers all over them. Nobody wants our GMO agriculture, and the only thing that is propping up Wall Street and the Federal Reserve right now is forcing the rest of the world to use the U.S. dollar for cross-border trade and banking. And more countries are turning away from that, and that is what has prompted this war. In fact, look at the early targets. Iraq first for selling their oil for the euro, then Libya for selling their oil for the gold dinar, and now that Russia and China are using their own currencies for cross-border trading and are talking about a gold-backed system, now all of a sudden we're talking about war with Russia and China. This is going to end bad.
Oh, and the other thing is, too, with this surveillance scam. I mean, if the narrative was Hillary's going to win easily, then what's the point of surveilling Trump or his campaign staff? What's the point of it? I think the point always was impeachment. I think they knew that he was going to win in the landslide, and they're like, we got to get this guy out, so we got to get some dirt on him right now. The other thing is the North Korea thing.
Well,
they're talking about selling weapons to Japan.
Before we go to North Korea, I want to back up. We know that the surveillance of Trump actually increased after he won the election. I think that is more explainable by the fact that everybody was committing all these crimes, Susan Rice spying on Trump, or Obama spying on Trump, and Sean Hannity and the rest of them, and they were all committing these crimes in the sure and certain belief that Hillary was going to be the next president and they would be safe from investigation and prosecution. And then once Donald Trump won the election, all of a sudden they're desperate to find something that they can either impeach him with or at least control him with or blackmail him with to save their own sorry rear end. Anyway, listen, John, I need to let you go. We got a call we got to take right now here. So thank you very much. We're going to switch over to Ryan Dawson. Ryan, welcome back to the show. What is on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I just posted a couple of stories on your site. I wanted to talk about the Syrian gas attack. It's blown up in the media, and it's horrible there's a gas attack, but you look at the hundreds of people the U.S. has been blowing up with conventional firebombs, and that doesn't get any attention. This story is getting attention because it's part of a PR campamean, as was the last gas its people stuff. And
it's also a distraction from Obamagate. I mean, that could have been a reason why they went ahead and did it now. They need something newsworthy to give the media an excuse not to report on Susan Rice and those revelations, and hopefully to distract the American people away from it. Wouldn't be the first time somebody started a war to distract from an embarrassing story. Remember when the Marine barracks in Beirut were bombed? 24 hours later, the U.S. invades Grenada.
Yeah, it's the Lewinsky effect.
Yes.
You put something sexy on TV to avoid a greater scandal like selling nuclear weapons to China. But it's also because they're losing the war. The Syrian army and the Iranians and Russians have been winning this war, 2 months without full CIA backing of the mercenaries, and ISIS can't hold its own anymore. And so this is serving as a pretext for the U.S. to 180, because Trump in the beginning was saying, look, we're not for regime change. Rex Tillerson is still saying, even after the attacks, we're still not for regime change, because the alternative to Assad is a lot worse. But these things were predicted, and the last gas attack, I mean, you think they'd find another excuse. Maybe they could recycle babies on incubators or something, because the last time they did you already went over it, but the last time they had this propaganda, it really fell on its face, and so it's amazing that they would use this again.
Well, it appears to be the only thing they've actually got, because they have to carry out something, and obviously the rebels already have the chemical weapons there, and they got them from the United States. And so this may, some people are saying that was planned or predicted weeks ago. On the other hand, it may have been a real rush job. Somebody said, we need a gas attack in Syria. We need an event in Syria we can blame on Assad. Well, let's just do another gas attack. But the fact that they've done this 3 times now, I really don't think people are buying this one.
Well, the last one, the terrorists went on YouTube and posted videos of themselves celebrating that they had this gas and they were killing rabbits, if you remember that.
I remember that.
Rabbits were dying, and then suddenly Obama says, we're going to put a red line in, and if they cross this line, and of course the terrorists were like, all right, well, they gave us the gas, now we're going to use it, we'll blame it on Assad. The red line has been crossed, and it's a pretext for the U.S. to have further intervention in Syria. And so this is recycled propaganda, but this is what the neocons always do. I mean, they recycled the propaganda for the Iraq War post 9/11 from lies that they had been saying in the 90s. And I wanted to point out, when you were talking about the petrodollar, the Israelis wrote a script for Iraq and Libya and Syria a long time ago, and there's that infamous Wesley Clark video where he's talking about what they meaning Richard Pearl for the Defense Planning Board, wrote up a paper of 7 countries they wanted to invade. And that all started long before different transactions on oil. Oh,
it started right back at the beginning, right after 9/11, or even before 9/11. We don't know when it actually originated. We know that when 9/11 happened, the plan to go to war in Afghanistan was already on Bush's desk. Do you want to stay through the commercial break? Do you have more to share with us?
Yeah, I'll stay through.
All right, we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Ryan Dawson. We're talking about this very obvious false flag, 3rd time's the charm, apparently, in which Assad has been blamed for a chemical weapon attack. And Nikki Haley is out there screaming, we must invade, we must evade. We'll do it alone if the rest of the world won't go with it. And everybody's pointing fingers. CBS is trying to blame Donald Trump for the gas attack, along with trying to blame Putin for it. But if you want to look for origination of how we got to this place, let's go back and remember that the U.S. has been trying to invade and regime change Syria for going on 6 years now. If they hadn't embarked on that, none of these gas attacks would happen. None of the bombings would happen. None of the death and misery would have happened if the U.S. government would simply learn to mind its own business and actually try and make things better here in this country. So, Ryan, what do you got to share with us now?
Yeah, well, Oded Yanan wrote this policy paper for the Israelis explicitly saying how they wanted to go into Syria, but it couldn't be done until they got rid of Saddam Hussein in Iraq first. They want to weaken this whole axis of Iran, Iraq, Syria. There's a rival pipeline, of course, as you know, worth $10 billion that would have broken the monopoly that pipeline from Azerbaijan to Turkey goes through, which slides through Israel before it can go east to Asia. And so they all benefit for being the middlemen in this oil access.
Yes.
And that would have been all broken apart. And the moment that troops were removed from Iraq, they signed on to this deal with Syria to build this pipeline. And then suddenly there are snipers shooting people at a funeral in Syria, Ukraine-style snipers. Like, there's no motive for these gas attacks either. Why would they? It doesn't make a dime's worth of difference battlefield-wise to gas a few people. All it does is destroy your credibility and hurts you internationally as a public relations stunt. It doesn't help you win the war at all. And they're winning the war. So why would you, in the middle of a war that you're finally starting to win, bust out gas, which, got your weapons of mass destruction removed the last time there was an incident like that? And they also forget all these people that say Assad must go and he's a monster, blah, blah, blah. Bashar al-Assad was the president for 10 years, from 2000 on, without any violence. Suddenly there's violence after they make this pipeline deal. And he actually said back in 2003, after the invasion of Iraq, that he proposed getting rid of all weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East, which included serious chemical weapons as well as any nuclear weapons. The only country in the Middle East that has nuclear weapons are the Israelis, which they won't admit. It's like their one China policy. It's something that everybody knows they have in the hundreds, and not subject to inspection, and yet no U.S. politician will acknowledge, other than Ron Paul and a few others, that Israel has these nuclear weapons. So Assad wanted to get rid of these weapons a long time ago, before this war started, but the others would not comply. They all wanted to hold on to their WMDs.
Well,
and of course, Iraq, which actually have them, got invaded. Libya gets rid of theirs, they get invaded.
We're back to well, that's the reason they want to get North Korea to surrender their nuclear weapons, to make it easier to invade them. But we're back to this whole question. Who actually benefits from the gas attack? Obviously, the rebels do, because now the U.S. can send them more support. Obviously, the U.S. warhawks benefit from this. Those are the only ones that this actually helps. It certainly does not help Assad, and it just doesn't make any sense for him to do it. And the story is absurd on the face of it for anybody who's got more than 2 brain cells to rub together.
And the timing is right before the peace talks, too.
Yeah, that is very suspicious as well. All right, Ryan, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go and do a station identification break. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're going to go ahead and take a phone call from Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I'll tell you the truth. This might be the last straw as far as I'm concerned, as far as Trump goes. If he does anything now, well, first of all, if there's anything in Syria right now, good possibility that you talk about Korea, but this could actually trigger off World War III, because I don't think the Russians are going to back down, and I don't think the Iranians are going to back down. But second of all, he's now gotten rid of Steve Bannon, at least as far as the national security, his National Security Administration goes, and from what I understand, he moved in, of all people, Rick Perry, this globalist neocon who also who also attended Bilderberg, and who tried to force those shots on girls some years back in Texas when I was still living there. So he is showing that he is either stupid or he's extremely weak, that he lets people he lets these neocons overrun him, or he was lying to us from the get-go. He never was who he thought he was. He ran his anti-globalist, anti-interventionist campaign, and now, he seems to be just the opposite of what he said. And I don't buy the fact that he's being just overrun by these neocons and these other globalists that he's putting in his government. He knows who these people are. He's not that stupid. He's responsible. He's president of the United States.
Hang on. First of all, let me say that, yes, I, too, am very disappointed in Donald Trump. However, I go for your option number 2. I think he is showing that he is, in fact, a weak leader, and he is letting himself get pushed around by these neocons, and this goes back to the concern I expressed about him back during the campaign. He comes from the world of business. He's used to doing things as a businessman. He is as naive about the real politics of Washington, D.C. as Jimmy Carter was. Jimmy Carter was just absolutely blindsided by the things that were done to him. And, Carter got pushed around and eventually out by the political machine in Washington, D.C., and I think that's what's happening here.
But you know what it is with Trump? He had good people around him, especially Flynn and Bannon. And he's now deserted both of them. Flynn, I knew right away when he got rid of Flynn. I says, well, this could be the beginning of the end. This might show exactly, like I said, how weak Trump really is, because there was nothing. Flynn did nothing wrong, nothing at all, and he got rid of him. And then, and now Bannon, and now we see this thing with Syria. I mean, it's so obvious. I would say there's as much chance of Assad being behind that gas attack as there is that a fat man in a red suit and a beard comes down your chimney every Christmas Eve. Okay? That's about how much chance there is that Assad actually did this. There was no reason for him to do it. It's obvious. And you say that John McCain was actually over there while this was going on?
I don't know that McCain was in.
I know he had been.
I know.
He was in the area.
He was in the area. He was in the Middle East. I don't know that it was actually in Syria. But, when Tillerson came on out and said that Trump was okay with Assad staying on as president if he won the next election, McCain just had a cow right there. And I think at that point, somebody said, we're going to lose this thing unless we escalate the war, find a way to escalate the war. So it may have been a rush job.
And I think I think this monster is actually behind this whole thing, McCain. He probably arranged it. for the gas to be transferred to these terrorists, if there was even gas used. Because, you know, I was on my way home, I was listening to InfoWars, and you know, what's her name, Leanne McAdoo and Owen Schroyer, and they were showing pictures. It looks like there was no gas in the first place. It was maybe, for all I know, they were using the same actors that they used at Sandy Hook in Boston.
Well, like I said, one of the things I noticed when I saw the photos put out by the white helmets, they're wearing face masks, but they're handling these supposed contaminated bodies without wearing any gloves, and that's a dead giveaway that something is not right.
Oh yeah, because especially with gas like that, I mean, you don't do that. No way. So I'm telling you, there's something wrong, and I think McCain may be behind this. And I also don't like that witch they got there at the UN. What's her name again?
Nikki Haley.
Nikki Haley, the former South Carolina governor.
Yep.
I don't like her at all, and I don't understand Trump putting her in the first place, because she was one of these never Trumpers during the campaign. So why are you going to put a woman like this in there in the first place? Then it makes no sense. I don't know. Maybe you're right. Maybe he is naive. Maybe he thinks he's running a business. He's not building a hotel, a fancy hotel or a casino. He's running the United States government. He's got some of those vile and vicious criminals working inside of that government. And if he's that stupid, I'm sorry, man. That's not an excuse. He wanted the job. He campaigned for the job. He said he was going to do certain things, and he's lying. If he's not outright lying, he's the equivalent of lying. We don't need war. We don't need the destruction of this planet. And that's how serious that could get. I mean, I don't understand what these people, what any of these people are thinking. But I understand we got out-and-out madmen within the government. I know we got out-and-out evil people within the government. McCain is one of them. He's not only a madman, he's evil. So is Graham. Yep. So are a lot of these others.
Well, like I said, it is the curse of political power that attracts the very people who should not be allowed to have it. We have the so-called conventional wisdom, and even though it's been disproved time and time again, politicians and the military-industrial complex always like to say that war is going to be good for the economy. No, it really isn't. It basically masks a dying economy with a high fever, and future generations pay for it down the road. Now, a lot of these politicians are going along with this because they probably own stock in those military companies, and a war is going to make them richer.
I think there's a lot of blackmail, too. You talk about pedophiles. I believe there's a lot of that going on in the government, too. And I just want to ask you about Tulsi Gabbard.
Okay.
I know I love her standing on war and peace. But what is she like as far as against globalism, against these trade agreements, these multinational trade agreements that give away our jobs? And what is she as far as defending our borders? Do you have any idea about that? She is your congresswoman.
Well, she's not my representative. I live in a different district from her, but she's unfortunately on board with a very open immigration policy. I don't think she supports completely open, unrestricted immigration. Overall, I like her, and I like some of the things that she's been trying to do. Unfortunately, her office has not responded to my invitation to have her on the show. So at this point, I'm probably not paying as much attention to her as I might, given that she is a local congresswoman. Anyway, listen, got to let you go. Got a bunch of phone calls here.
Sure.
All right, we're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And by the way, I put up a poll on whatreallyhappened.com. Do you believe Assad just gassed his own people? There's one vote for yes, who's obviously somebody who monitors this site for the opposition, and everybody else voted no. So, yeah, nobody's buying this one here. All right, we're going to take 3 more phone calls and then get back to the news, because I get emails saying you're doing too many phone calls. Nick in Southern California, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Thanks for taking my call. I'm thinking that it occurred to me that this Russia-Trump thing, it's so stupid that they keep pounding on this, no evidence, and I'm asking myself why. Why do they make themselves look so bad by continuing with this narrative? And what I came to the conclusion, or at least a potential conclusion is that if we get pushed into war, in wartime hysteria, people will believe anything. And if we get into a wartime hysteria, and they basically can look back and, push this Russia-Trump thing, and people will start to believe it because they'll believe anything at that time. Because they're so desperate. And I think that this push into Syria, this false flag, they want to push us into this war. And I also think that Trump might be going along with a lot of this stuff because he's aware that without us going to war and forcing hegemonic ruling of the dollar, if you will, this country will fall apart, and he doesn't want it to happen on his watch. Those are all the things that I'm thinking.
That could definitely be a factor. The first one you talk about, though, where during wartime people will naturally cling to the government, that is true to an extent. But in past wars, the general public has gone along with the official story of the war because at the start of the war, they had a high degree of trust and confidence in their government and their media. That has changed now. We've been at war all over the world now, longer than we were in World War II. And at this point, people are very skeptical of what the government says. And so I think that skepticism is not going to vanish overnight just because there's a war.
Well, I do agree with that. However, what I also think is that the extent to which we are at war is not really understood by a lot of the public. And we are currently at war, but I think it's not this massive conflict where we have, tens or hundreds of thousands of soldiers fighting in this massive world war. I also think that part of the reason we're not in that size conflict right now is people like us, the independent media, people like us who continue to make the public aware that the government is not to be trusted. I think if the government was trusted to the extent that it was in the 1950s, we would be full bore into some massive war and everybody would be going along with it. And we are the antidote to that, the independent media.
Absolutely on that. Regarding the numbers of people involved in these wars, at least on our side, we don't know what those numbers really are. Certainly during Vietnam, the numbers were downplayed to make it seem like it was less serious than it was. We didn't find out the total participation and the total losses until after that war was over. And we're in a situation right now where the Pentagon is absolutely refusing to report on how many U.S. forces are inside Syria and Iraq.
And that's to the point there. Mike, I know you got a lot of calls, and I know you're taking too many calls. Thank you for taking mine. Come stateside, man. I will donate to help you get here.
All right. Thank you very much.
Or not stateside, but, mainland. Mainland.
All right. Well, Claire and I are working on a plan to do that right now. We're going to switch over to Glenn in Philadelphia. Aloha, Glenn. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Jesse Ventura tells the story of how when he was elected to governor of Minnesota, and after he'd been on the job a few days, he was ushered into a conference room full of heavies who said, "Hey, congratulations on your gubernatorial win. Welcome aboard. And now we're going to tell you how things work around here because we run this joint." And I have little doubt that Donald Trump has experienced something very similar by now. Let's not forget that he was visited by Henry Kissinger twice at Trump Tower en route to all of this. And, I'm relative, and one of your callers earlier was saying that, either he was weak or maybe maybe he's betraying people, not doing what he said. This caller missed an option. Donald Trump could very much be under threat. When somebody threatens your family and your children and your businesses and your own life, sit them down, show them a copy of their Zapruder film and warn them off. Sometimes you have to go along, not just to get along, but to survive. And I suspect he's doing what good he can when he can. That's
a very good theory, and it may have come as a shock to Trump that when he was sworn into the office, he sort of assumed that the security system of the United States was going to be obedient, and then he finds out that the security apparatus is actually against him, and as a result, he doesn't really have any protection. I know he's got his own personal security inside the Secret Service Protective Detail, but it is very, very clear that if a large intelligence agency of a nation state wants to assassinate somebody, that person is going to be assassinated, and they'll find some poor patsy to blame it on, the crazed lone nut shooter. And you're entirely possible. Trump's life may have been threatened. Melania may have been threatened. It's entirely possible. It's entirely possible.
I think he's a worldly wise man in the sense that he's used to doing large-scale business in New York and around the world. He's used to dealing with unions and mobsters and stuff like that, and unscrupulous contractors, and correcting things and making things work. But I don't think he comprehended the full magnitude of the duplicity and evil that is present in D.C.
Well, I agree. I agree with you on that one. I agree with you on that one. I've been saying that since the campaign. He is he came into this job as naive as Jimmy Carter was, and Jimmy Carter was absolutely not prepared to deal with all the attacks on him coming from all these different quarters. Anyway, it's a good theory that you have out there. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. One last quick thought. If we get into it with North Korea and China, this causes us to bang heads with China. If they dump our treasuries and cut off our iPhones, we're in deep doo-doo.
Well, at this point, the Federal Reserve is just creating tons and tons of new money out of thin air to buy up the treasuries. And it's all just funny money and funny paper and back and forth. And the true scale of it, of course, is being hidden from the American people. There used to be an economic indicator called the M3 aggregate, which was a measure of how much U.S. currency was in circulation, and that was a firm indicator of the real rate of inflation. They stopped reporting that years ago. That's something the American people aren't allowed to know anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And China can cut off our textiles and hardlines, goods overnight, and all of a sudden all of our big box stores have nothing to sell.
Well, that's not a problem because they don't have customers anyway in this economy.
Good point. All right, thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks. We're going to take one more phone call from Brendan in San Francisco. Then we're going to close the phone lines. I'm going to get back to doing some news. Brendan, what's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I think one of the great parts of your show are the callers and their brain power to keep the show moving. By the way, you are getting some great calls. You should just limit people to like 2 points and then move on. I quickly just want to point out that Joel Skousen is claiming that Trump is being buried in all these meetings, and they're just keeping him totally distracted, and he's been delegating too much to his subordinates. But like you said, keep it simple. All wars are bankers' wars, and this guy has been compromised. They've got to him. And I'm going to let you go on that note, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to let you go. Yeah, that's something else. Donald Trump's drained the swamp. He's spending off these allegations about Russia, and now he's got the Susan Rice scandal, which is an opportunity for him to regain the initiative and go on the offensive. And if he doesn't, then I think it's probably pretty certain that he has been compromised or threatened or blackmailed, in which case this nation is in serious, serious, serious trouble, because the people who are driving us forward into the war, they don't care what harm it brings to the American nation, the American reputation, the American people, as long as they get richer off of their military-industrial stocks. That's it. They're just totally focused on their own immediate gain to the exclusion of all else. All righty, getting on back to this circus. Russia is denying Assad was to blame for the chemical attack. Assad, of course, has said, no, we didn't do it. And this now puts Russia on a collision course with Donald Trump, now that Donald Trump has committed to this fairy tale that Assad gassed his own people for no gosh darn good reason whatsoever. And I'm not sure what's going on here. Is Trump being controlled, being blackmailed? Is he an idiot? Or has he been told that if we don't go to war in Syria, we will lose it, it will be seen as a military defeat, and Trump doesn't want that as part of his legacy? The first military defeat of the United States of America since Vietnam. I don't know. But it's a very, very troubling, disappointing development here. Now, as I mentioned before, security experts, particularly one UK security analyst was being interviewed on Russia Today and said, the rebels are the only people who benefited from this. Assad gained nothing from it. It's like that caller said. There was no military justification for it. It just came out of thin air. It's a propaganda operation. All right, we've got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And, boy, that didn't take very long at all. The CIA has now restored funding to the moderate rebels in Syria. The funding had been frozen last February under orders from Donald Trump. And it's now been restored with one proviso. The moderate rebels have to focus on taking down Assad. No more infighting with Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Remember when the U.S. tried to tell you that they were in Syria to fight ISIS and Al-Qaeda? Not anymore. We're going to get Assad, no matter how many lies it takes. BBC just ran an article bashing Russia over its refusal to go along with the collective lie about Assad gassing his own people. How dare you not believe our lies? We worked really hard to craft that one. So, let's see. Assad did not use chemical weapons. Deep state neocons misleading the president. There's another theory in line with that caller here. And again, we need to go back and look at history to find out what is really going on. And look at all the times we have been lied to. Saddam's nuclear weapons. Assad gassed his own people 2013. Assad gassed his own people 2014. This is just more of the same. How many more times are you going to allow yourself to be lied to until you're ready to stand up and say, I will not believe your lies anymore? Because at some point you're going to have to do that. As the American people, you're going to have to stand up and scream, the government is full of it. You are lying. We are not going to listen to you anymore, because every time we listen to you and trust you, it costs us our money and the life and limb of our children. And enough is enough is enough is enough. Okay, now in other news regarding Syria, in the province of Raqqa, intense fighting is ongoing in the village of Safa, northeast of the town of Tapga. Now this is the area where the U.S. is enlarging the runway to take the C-17, supposedly in the fight against ISIS and Al-Qaeda, except we just found out that the CIA's funding to the moderate rebels included a provision not to fight ISIS and Al-Qaeda, but to focus on Assad. So the invasion of Syria is well and truly on, and it almost looks like the war hawks don't even care if you know what's really going on anymore. Because you're just going to go along with it. You'll salute the flag. You'll pay the costs of the war. You send your children off to die. Meanwhile, the loose cannon continues to be Turkey, because apparently there have been a lot of defections from the Euphrates Shield operation. And they are revealing that they were actually trained in Turkey by Turkish army officers. They weren't organic rebels. And apparently, according to a story coming out of Fars News, Turkey is planning to form more terrorist groups in Syria. They even have, the deal there. The terrorists get Turkish nationality, and they get $400 a month to be members of these terror groups. So Turkey is now a state sponsor of terror. And nobody seems to be too concerned about that. Now, Syrian ambassador to Russia, Riyad Haddad, has said that the government of Syria has the right to protect its territory by all means, including military, if Turkey does not stop its actions in northern Syria. Which I think Turkey has been doing on behalf of the U.S. agenda. Erdogan is also saying he may send the Turkish army into Iraq as part of Euphrates Shield operation. We've got way too many world leaders who think war is a cool thing right now. It's making me very, very, very nervous here. Now, former commander in charge of the U.S. Army military police in Iraq is saying President Trump's new... Oh, we got to take a break. Commercials? We'll get to this when we come back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And former commander in charge of U.S. Army military police in Iraq is saying President Trump's new national security advisor, General McMaster, ordered criminal abuse of hundreds of Iraqi detainees in 2005. In other words, he committed war crimes in Iraq. And he's a new national security advisor. And that is a very, very troubling development. We look back on that period, the abuses at Abu Ghraib and other places like that. The U.S. literally tortured innocent Iraqis, in some cases to death, to find nuclear weapons of mass destruction that never existed. For all you Kafka fans out there. All right, we're going to go ahead and grab one more phone call. Alex in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Not much, Michael. I think that more now than ever that all governments are basically religions. And I mean, it's obvious at this point that anyone that becomes the president of the United States is going to follow the agenda of the big priest, and that's it.
Well, I agree with you. Governments do operate as religions because they rely on the unquestioning belief and faith of their supplicants. And what we're seeing in the United States right now, and again, this was a symptom we saw in the former Soviet Union, people are losing that faith. They don't believe the government is good anymore. They don't believe the media is honest. They don't believe the banking system is fair. And that is a very, very serious problem. And that may be another reason why they're pushing forward to try and get a war on this belief that if they can get a major war going, that we, the people, will forget all about the crimes and corruption and unfair treatment and lies and so forth, and we'll throw a snappy salute at the flag and throw our money and our children into wherever we're told to throw them. And but it does operate as a religion. For that matter, so does banking. It's all based on belief. Yeah. You're ruled through your beliefs. And that's why the powers that be try and get you to rely on belief rather than analytical thinking, to the point where you're literally bribed to believe in things when you're a child. Believe in the fat man at the North Pole, you get a bicycle. Believe in the Easter Bunny, you get candy. Believe in the Tooth Fairy, you get the money, and so forth and so on. Children literally are being conditioned to allow beliefs to control their brains, and you are enslaved by those beliefs.
You got that right. And I'm hopeful that if we tried to go into like another world war, or even with Syria, I think that the people would rise up, or at least hope that they would rise up and let the governments know that we know what the story is. And it's you guys that we need to go to war with you. And we need to remember that Ross Perot came out and said that his life was threatened and his family's life was threatened. And look at the last great president that really tried to do something about the control of the world or the United States. It was Kennedy, obviously.
Well, remember during the primaries, that photo that came on out of Bernie Sanders with the bruise on his face? There were stories that he'd literally been physically assaulted and beaten up and, told to back off from Hillary.
Yeah, I think the Clintons are I think they're the head puppets of the puppets, I must say. Yeah. I don't think they're calling the shots, but I do think they're like some pretty high-ranking puppets. And it's just unfortunate that, it's the devil. The people that control this world are the devil, man. It's especially this country. And people, I keep on watching YouTube stuff, how they act like Trump's the Messiah or whatever, chosen by God to run this country. No, he's not. He's not. They need to do more documentaries on the evils of the people that are controlling Trump right now.
Yeah, they do. They absolutely do.
I mean, think about it. If you had kids, and they were threatened, or you're going to do what these people want you to do, what would you do?
Yeah, that could be going on as well. But I think the surveillance state is in a position of incredible power because of this system of surveillance on everybody, and we know they spy on politicians. We know they spy on anybody of any influence whatsoever, trying to get anything that they can use to blackmail and control them. In fact, I think we have a system right now where unless you have something that you can be blackmailed with, you're not allowed to rise above a certain level in our society because you can't be controlled. You're not predictable. And that may be what's behind some of this pedophilia nonsense, where it's kind of a rite of passage, where you have to do something that you can be blackmailed over in order to be allowed to rise above a certain level. And that may explain the very casual attitude people have toward things like Jeffrey Epstein and his little pleasure island down in the Caribbean. I mean, anybody going down there to avail themselves of the underage girls has to know the place is wired for microphones and cameras. And they went anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, and what's very unfortunate, you know, a lot of the African American people, when Obama was elected, he didn't govern on any of his platforms that he was running on, that his campaign ran on, like the public option, stuff like that. And they always said, well, it's not his fault. They recognize it as not being his fault now, but do the people recognize it as not being Trump's fault now? I don't think that they do. I think that the people that are in control of everything have us nicely against each other, and we the people need to stand up, and we need to recognize that we need to stick together.
I would agree with you on that one, definitely. All right, well, listen, we're going to let you go here. I want to get back to some real news. And there's an interesting article that came out from Zero Hedge saying the real reason the federal government has been keen to blame Russia for everything going on comes down to gold, because Russia and China are at the forefront of nations trying to break free of their control by the U.S. Federal Reserve note. And the Federal Reserve note is still the dominant world reserve currency, but it's not the only one. Now people are talking about baskets. And the U.S. used that U.S. dollar, following Bretton Woods, to exert tremendous control over the world's economy. And that control is slipping. And that is the motivation for this rush to war. The U.S. government is expecting they're going to win this next war, like they won World War I and World War II, which means they've been watching way too many movies, because the U.S. was on the winning side but didn't win those single-handedly. And in the aftermath of this next world war, the U.S. will once again tell the rest of the world, you will use our currency for all cross-border trade and banking, thereby we will plunder you and collect our imperial tax. And we've heard Russia is buying up gold like crazy, so is China. They're talking about a gold-based bilateral trading system that doesn't go through currencies loaned at interest by private central banks. If you haven't read my article, All Wars Are Bankers' Wars, it's got a permanent link up near the very top of the page in that the gray box area. And you need to read it to understand how these private central banks, in order to maintain this system of enslavement for the last 300 years, have been willing to start wars, assassinate rulers, commit whatever crime it takes to maintain that control, to keep you their debt slaves. One of the big parts of the push for a global government is to enslave all of mankind to a single global private central bank to make us all debt slaves from now until whenever the sun swells up and swallows our planet. That's the plan. Now, people are looking at this terror attack in St. Petersburg, and Putin went and laid flowers at the graves of the victims. Did you notice we didn't see any of these lit-up monuments like we see for the terror attacks in Europe? There's no Je suis St. Petersburg or Je suis Russian floating around. And there's an article out here in Investment Watch blog again saying that the initial evidence from this St. Petersburg attack seems to indicate an orchestrated attempt by Western governments to try and get rid of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Certainly the coincidence of timing with the terror attacks that took place against the Russian embassy in Damascus indicates collusion over a large part of the globe here. Turning to Yemen, the U.S. has launched more airstrikes in Yemen last month than in all of 2016. And, you know, it's kind of weird to see the corporate media just go on and on about these civilians who are supposed victims of this gas attack in Syria when you realize U.S.-led forces killed more Syrian civilians last month than ISIS, Russia, or the gas attack all put together. But nobody talks about them. It's only the poor, suffering victims of the gas attack we have to go after Assad. It is a crock. Now, turning over to North Korea, a senior White House official has issued a dire warning that the clock has now run out on North Korea's nuclear program. All options are on the table. So they're going to be talking about, well, another invasion there that you will pay for, that your children will die in. China, meanwhile, has upped the ante, saying that if the United States invades North Korea, China will do whatever it takes to protect China's territorial boundaries. And that includes those South China Sea islands. So we really are rushing to a new world war. Yesterday we were talking about how a Spanish warship sailed into British military waters, the military zone around Gibraltar. The British warships chased it back out. But again, it's another confrontation. It's another provocation. It's almost like every day there's another conflict somewhere. All we're missing is the really big bang where everybody will say, oh, it's a world war. Because if you go back and you look at the history of World War I and World War II, they all began as scattered little conflicts all over the place. Serbia, Austria, Hungary. Then it grew to include Germany, and everybody hopped on into that one. Same thing with World War II. There were ongoing conflicts. Manchuria, for example. The war in Europe, and then there was the Big Bang, Pearl Harbor. Oh, it's a world war now. And we can expect a big bang of some kind to try and get us all motivated and hot and bothered for more bloodshed, especially now as the establishment is struggling to maintain credibility in the face of all these revelations of Obamagate and Susan Rice spying on Trump. Down in Venezuela, and by the way, you should be watching what's going on in Venezuela because it's going to happen here as our economy falls apart. And apparently the anti-Maduro protests have gotten violent, and the Venezuelan National Guard is apparently trading gunfire with them now. Now, my question is, are the anti-Maduro protesters really Venezuelan, or are they another George Soros-funded regime change? Because the U.S. has been trying to get into Venezuela going all the way back to Hugo Chavez. In fact, they succeeded in ousting Hugo Chavez for about a week. Still playing all these little games here. The Lebanese Prime Minister Saad Hariri is warning that Israel is clearly showing signs of wanting a new conflict with Lebanon. Israel still wants that Litani River. They want that fresh water diverted down to Israel. Even though, as we reported yesterday, there's been a breakthrough development in desalinization involving graphene filters. Israel's government, though, is unfortunately still behaving like a Bronze Age tribe in terms of how they interact with everybody else around them. Now, down in Palestine, Hamas has issued a statement saying the path to peace is very simple. They will accept a Palestinian state within the 1967 borders. Now, they're still not talking about recognizing Israel until Israel is willing to recognize Palestine. And do you realize that has been the problem all along? Israel carves off a chunk of Palestine and says, we are now Israel, we demand that you recognize us. Palestine says, okay, fair is fair, do you recognize us? Oh, absolutely not. There's no such thing as Palestine, there never was. There's no such thing as Palestinian people. We want that land eventually, especially Jerusalem. And that's been the cause of all the misery and bloodshed ever since. If Israel would simply grant to other nations that which it demands for itself, recognition of a right to exist, all of this could have been avoided. But Israel's government still dreams of Eretz Israel, from the Nile to the Euphrates. As long as the American taxpayers pay for it, and American kids die in it, that'll make it all hunky-dory. Now then, as you know, Israel supporters have begun a campaign of what is called lawfare against the boycott sanctions movement against Israel, and including some of these universities that are having academic boycotts of Israel. And one of the lawsuits that was filed by current and former members of the ASA last year argued that an academic boycott of Israel represented a breach. Oh, we got to take a break for commercials. More about this when we come back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. So we're talking about this story, and it involves the American Studies Association, which passed a resolution in 2013 to boycott Israeli academic institutions. And some of their own members, who are pro-Israel, filed a lawsuit arguing that the resolution was a breach of contract because it fell outside the scope of the group's mission as described in its charter. And this is apparently a new lawfare tactic that claims any institution that is talking about a boycott of Israel is acting outside their legally defined charter. And fortunately, a federal court in Washington, D.C. has thrown this out, saying that there's no restriction, saying that an organization formed with a charter can't expand its area of interest after that. So that one fell apart. Apparently another F-16 jet has crashed near Joint Base Andrews in Maryland. And it's part of our aging fleet. Apparently there are some Navy pilots, training pilots, who are literally going on strike because the standard training aircraft is called the Goshawk. And that fleet is 30 years old. And its oxygen system has developed some problems, leading to toxic materials being inhaled by the pilots and the students. And the Navy's refused to correct it, and the training pilots are basically staging a strike, risking a court-martial, but they're saying the planes are not safe anymore. All right, let's talk about the economic news here. Outgoing Federal Reserve Governor Daniel Tarullo on CNBC is talking about the March jobs growth, describing it as new evidence of economic traction. And apparently U.S. companies added 263,000 jobs in March, and that was well above the expected 185,000. So That's a good indicator, but we're starting to get the retail earnings numbers in from the first quarter, and right now it's not looking good. In fact, it's looking like the worst since late 2014, which was a hard time. People just don't have money to buy things with. As we mentioned before, Payless is declaring bankruptcy, closing all their stores, and internet sales, online sales, have now become everybody's favorite scapegoat. Oh, we could have been successful. It's those online sales. And no, it isn't. I don't know about anybody else, but I go to online sources to buy things only if I can't find what I need in the local stores. Call me old-fashioned. I want to go into a store, actually pick the product up, look at it, make sure it's built halfway decently. Then I give them my money. They give me the product. I go home happy. Instant gratification is a big part of the retail experience. We'll be back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're going to take a phone call from Mateus in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. I got one of my random lists. I waited till near the end of the show. Hope it's okay timing.
Okay.
Just want to remind everybody about the radiation from self-driving cars is going to be astronomically more dangerous than cell phone radiation, and it's to take that into consideration with this leaked document about the actual dangers of the radiation that from the EPA, that the cell phones really are of concern, and that there is a correlation between the location of brain tumors in many patients and the way that they hold the cell phone. I'm always looking for reasons to be down on the self-driving cars, so this is one of them.
Well, I think that's a problem only if you have one of those cars that has plastic bodies. If you have an old-fashioned traditional, or you have a car that's got a steel body, you're obviously going to be shielded from the radiation because the emitters, receivers have to be on the outside of the car.
Well, you can get pretty good cell phone reception inside of a metal car.
Point taken. Point taken.
Okay, next one. The Prime Minister of Canada, just a fun fact here. The name Prime Minister, the definition of a minister is somebody who serves you, like who ministers to your needs. And over in England, the top minister, like the top servant, is the groom of the stool. That cleans the Queen's rear end. And so the Prime Minister in Canada can't...
we seem to be going off in a bizarre direction here, Mateus, and I think maybe...
forget about it.
Yeah, I think we need to get back to the news here. All right, so, Mateus, thank you very much. We're going to let you go. And you got to stop drying your hair in the microwave oven. All right, turning to the economic news, Gregory Mannarino is out there saying that there are serious signals in the bond market. Everyone's talking about what's going to go first, the stock market, the bond market. Everyone's talking about how overvalued the stock market is. Gregory Mannarino is saying the bond market is starting to flash red. And the indicators just aren't there to say that we have a working economy, and they're talking now the greater recession. They might as well go ahead and say we're in a depression. We have been in an economic decline going back at least to 2008. And they like to keep talking about the soaring stock market, which we know is the result of manipulation. But if you were to take all those stock market numbers and revalue them in terms of gold, you would find that the stock market has actually been in decline. Now, apparently, Adidas, the shoe manufacturer, is closing down their factory in Asia and relocating to Germany. That's the good news. The bad news is the German factory is going to use robots to make the shoes. So it's not actually creating any jobs. Now, robots are cool and robots are fun, but again, there seems to be this institutional blindness where owners of corporations don't seem to understand. your employees collectively are also collectively your customers. You cannot have a working economy where everybody's trying to sell things that are made by robots or foreign labor, and your customers don't have the jobs with which to earn the money to buy those products. And it's for that reason why in the stores that are now getting these self-service automated checkouts, I won't use them. We're hearing about fast food restaurants now starting to use robots. I won't go to them. We have got to get people back to work. We have over 90 million Americans who've been unable to find jobs for months, if not years. And that's 90 million Americans who are not able to trade their labor for decent wages and salaries and then take that money and pump it back into the economy. It's a failed system. Now, apparently, and we've talked about this before, but apparently U.S. tourism is in trouble. And a big part of it has to do with vacationers coming from Mexico who are enraged by Trump's immigration ban, and so they're flying over the U.S. and going up into Canada. Now, our tourism industry has been in trouble for a long time, long before the immigration issue. Hawaii obviously is heavily dependent on tourism, and starting with the abuses of the TSA, our tourism has really suffered because of it. Our tourism authority likes to claim that our hotels have an 80% occupancy rate, which sounds really good. What they're not mentioning are all the resorts, B&Bs, hotels that have gone out of business. I mean, if you drive up the leeward side of Oahu, you will see these resorts, huge resorts, that have just been boarded up. The grounds are going back to the wild. They used to be booming businesses, not anymore. Now, I think the state is thinking that this new light rail system is going to draw some tourists away from Waikiki, which is not making Waikiki happy, and get them out at least as far as Ko'olina, which is this other resort area that's being developed by Disney, and sort of spread things out. They also want to take out some of the business congestion from Honolulu and lure it over to Kapolei. Some years ago, they built a new business technology incubator out in Kapolei, and the buildings, for the most part, still remain empty, because driving out on the H1 is a nightmare. The H1 has not been enlarged to deal with the increase in traffic. They've taken shortcuts like the zipper lane. And if you don't know what that is, it means that the center lanes on the H1 freeway, there's a portable barrier that shifts back and forth to try and maximize the traffic coming in. In the morning, the eastbound traffic gets the extra lane. In the afternoon, the westbound traffic gets the extra lane. It's a big machine that just drives down the middle, shifting the barricade back and forth. Hence the name zipper lane. And unfortunately, that machine tends to break down a lot, which only makes things worse. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Pensions are in the news again, apparently up in Chicago. Chicago collected $90 million for their pension plan, but they're having to pay retirees almost $1 billion. It's a huge, huge shortfall. All of these pensions are in trouble because back in 2008, when Wall Street was pulling off that mortgage-backed security fraud, Wall Street's pet ratings agencies all rated these mortgage bundles AAA. Now, pension funds, because you're dealing with a clientele who is near the end of their life and they don't have the luxury of starting over again, pension funds are only allowed to invest in safe investments, AAA. And so pension funds bought into these. And the fraud collapsed. Pensions lost huge amounts of money, and that's why they're in trouble. Nobody wants to point the finger at Wall Street. Congress did get some of these ratings agencies executives in for a hearing, and the ratings agency executive said, well, it was just our opinion. You know, nobody should pay that much attention to it. It's just our opinion that these things were good investments. Everybody's passing the buck. Nobody went to jail for any of this. Apparently, a 56-year-old partner at Paulson and Company, who was linked to billions of dollars of losses in Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme, has jumped off a building in Midtown Manhattan. And a lot of people connected to the Madoff scam are suddenly dying. And it may be over a simple question. Where did some of this money go? They were never able to find out where all the money went to. And maybe somebody who knows where it is doesn't want there to be anybody else around who knows where it is. There seems to be a lot of wet work going on. Remember that period we went through with Deutsche Bank, where all of a sudden a bunch of their mid-level executives were all of a sudden walking off of parking structures and things. Now, Richmond Fed President Jeffrey Lacker has been forced to resign after admitting he leaked confidential Fed monetary policy information to Medley Global Advisors, a publisher of macroeconomic analysis for institutions such as hedge funds and asset managers. It's owned by the Financial Times. And there's no indication he's going to face criminal prosecution, but he was leaking out this information to give Medley Global Advisors a leg up, an advantage over people who are playing by the rules. It really is a corrupted system. Now, turning over to the European Union, there is more trouble in Brussels. Apparently, Serbia is now starting to have serious doubts about being part of the European Union. And we're seeing this start to manifest all over Europe. It's been building for a very, very long time. But now with the success of Brexit, Marine Le Pen talking about a Frexit, Italy and Greece talking about simply being forced out, and now with that heavy-handed stunt by Brussels, threatening Hungary and Poland, if they don't take any more refugees, they'll be forced out of the bloc. Everybody is starting to rethink this European Union experiment, and it's starting to fall apart. And all of George Soros' horses and all of George Soros' men are not going to be able to put this one back together again. Interesting little video coming out of Sweden. Remember, Sweden, world's first feminist government. They're hardcore liberals up there, open borders, welcoming everybody. And in fact, Sweden has gotten more refugees than pretty much any other nation in Europe so far. Huge influx. And it's causing all kinds of problems, rapes, robberies, and everything. And every time you talk about it, oh, you're just being racist, you're just doing this, you're just doing that. Well, there's an interesting little video where these 3 female police officers, remember, feminist government, these 3 female police officers saw this asylum seeker walking along the street with a metal rod smashing car windows. And they tried to take him into custody with another asylum seeker who was trying to help them, help the officers. And this guy still got away from them. They even pepper sprayed him. And he got away. Now, apparently there's been another ugly incident down in Virginia. This is reported at 12160. 3 Salvadorans basically murdered a teenager in Virginia and then mutilated the body. They've been charged with second-degree murder. So how's that open borders thing working out for you, huh? California's sanctuary state bill is now moving to the Assembly. And if it passes the Assembly and Jerry Brown signs it, which is highly likely, it's going to set up a confrontation between the state of California and the Trump administration. And the fact of the matter is that all of these sanctuary cities are in violation of the law. And it's one thing to defy a law if you think the law is bad. Okay? It's another thing when you're defying a law that's supposed to protect the people. And if we look at all of these situations around the world and here in the United States, of all the crime, the sudden introduction of contagious diseases, the MS-13 gang, and by the way, these 3 guys who were arrested for mutilating that kid in Virginia were members of MS-13. You understand these laws do serve a purpose to protect the American people. And all these politicians who are on board with the globalist agenda and the sanctuary cities are exposing their own people to increased danger to serve a political ideology. Now, down in Kansas City, voters have voted to lower the penalty for the possession of marijuana to a $25 fine and no jail. And we're continuing to see this demand for decriminalization all across the country. By the way, my server's under heavy attack right now. Somebody's not happy with something I said. Speaking of computers, interestingly enough, apparently some firms in Great Britain have come under large-scale hacking attacks, which appear to be espionage. And cybersecurity experts are saying, well, it's coming from China. China's breaking in to steal trade secrets and customers' personal information. Really? How can you say that? We know the CIA has two completely separate programs, Umbrage, and I think the other one was Marble, where they copy and mimic hacking tools from other countries in order to carry out hacking attacks and frame a third party. And we know the U.S. government is openly hostile to China right now. It's another frame-up. It is impossible to say, in light of the revelations about the CIA, where something comes from, where a hack attack comes from. You can't. Now, down in Brazil, apparently hackers managed to take control of a Brazilian bank's entire DNS infrastructure. Now, this was discovered by Kaspersky Lab, and they were able to simply grab all of these banks' websites and redirect the traffic to phony servers that were set up to look like the real banks. People were logging in with their credentials, their passwords, and the hackers seized all of this information. Now, there was a very sad story a while back, and it had an unfortunate ending. There was a 15-year-old Canadian, Amanda Todd, and she got caught by an online sextortionist, Aidan Coban, who managed to hack into her webcam, got compromising pictures of her, and then demanded that she send more pictures of herself, states of undress, doing certain things, or he was going to post the pictures he already had to the rest of the world. And this poor young lady committed suicide. And apparently this Aidan Coban has now been approved for extradition from the Netherlands. And he may be coming back to Canada to stand trial for what he did. You know what is very frustrating to me? When webcams first came on out, they had these built-in shutters where you could close them. And for some reason, they don't have them anymore. Maybe it's the NSA saying, no, leave those off there. We got to watch people through those things. And again, every time the NSA opens up another portal to spy on you, they're opening it up for the cyber criminals. The NSA has not made America's IT infrastructure more secure. Quite the contrary. It is now incredibly weak and vulnerable. That's one of the reasons cybercrime is spiraling out of control. Now, apparently, Apple has rushed out an emergency patch to plug a severe security hole. And apparently, it lies in the vulnerability lies in Broadcom's Wi-Fi stack, which Apple uses in its handhelds and its iPads. And apparently, it's a nasty drive-by Wi-Fi security hole that they've just discovered. And by the way, if you have not changed your passwords on your iPhones and iPads, you only have 2 more days before the deadline for that ransomware demand. that was being made against Apple by this hacking group in Great Britain. Now it's turning out that Tizen, which is the open source operating system that Samsung uses on a range of their Internet of Things devices and is positioned as a sometimes competitor to Android, is just full of major security flaws. In fact, it's being described as amateurishly written. More about this when we come on back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go to the phones. Charlie in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Charlie, are you there? Going once? Going twice? Okay. All right. Back to the news. Now then, as you know, there's been a big stink over the fact that Congress has passed a law, and Trump has signed it, allowing Internet service providers to sell your browsing history to whoever they want. Marketing companies, advertising companies, blackmailers, who knows? A lot of people were very upset about this. And as it turns out, up in Canada, Canadian ISPs are not allowed to violate and sell your private information. But at this point in the United States, anything that makes money is seen as good. Anything that doesn't make money is seen as bad. This lust for stacks of paper with colored ink all over it has really destroyed what was best in the American character. I almost don't recognize this country anymore. It's certainly vastly different from what it was like when I was young. Now, Canada is not perfect. Apparently, Canada, in order to protect their use of the Stingray device, okay, they just cut loose 35 mafia suspects. They had 35 mafia suspects. They collected evidence on them using the Stingray device, and rather than turn over information on the Stingray device in the court case, just let these mafia guys go. It was a massive criminal conspiracy. And in order to protect the Stingray, they just let them go. You can go out, be criminals again, conspire again. We don't want to do anything about that here. Now, we were talking the other day about privacy. We're always hearing that constant canard. If you've got nothing to hide, then why would you care about your privacy? If you've done nothing wrong, why are you obsessed with privacy? Well, why do you have curtains in your windows? Why do you close the bathroom door? Why do you have an opaque shower curtain? People have an instinctive need for privacy. They don't want everything that they're doing made public. And that doesn't mean that what they're doing is illegal. It's just private. So, to nobody's surprise, a recent Reuters Ipsos poll is showing a majority of Americans are unwilling to give up their privacy under this claim that somehow it will thwart terrorist attacks. And part of the reason is because while the media will make a huge presentation about the terror attacks, they are very rare. You're much more likely to be killed by your doctor than by a terrorist. And as we showed with our NSA challenge a few years ago, real terrorists, real criminals can easily create systems of encryption that cannot be broken by the government. And so this poll is showing 75% of adults say they will not let investigators tap into their Internet activity to help the U.S. combat domestic terrorism. Real terrorists already know the Internet is compromised. They're not going to use it. Or if they use it, it's going to be code phrases that will be meaningless to a man in the middle. Please stop for donuts on the way home. What does that mean? Are they really getting donuts, or is something else going on? Now then, let's see. Did Charlie come back? Charlie, are you there? Okay, all right, Charlie's gone. All right, phone lines are still open, 800-313-9443, and we're coming up on a commercial break. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We got a bunch of phone calls to get to. We're going to start with Al in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. You were talking about privacy and data collection in the United States. There's a story on the CBC today that the RCMP is doing just that to people up here in Canada. And this is coming from, the propaganda tax-funded CBC website. So the RCMP is admitting that they've been doing this illegally up until 2 months ago. So, this sort of thing is rampant. It's rampant. I mean, are they actually trying to bring down the governments of countries? It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, I think what we're seeing is that all governments that are oppressing their people are now afraid that the people realize what's going on. And I think for the most part that this surveillance of everybody is more of a bluff than anything real. I'm sure that certain individuals are being targeted, like Donald Trump, but there simply isn't enough manpower or computer power to make heads or tails of this huge amount of data on the entire population. And so I think it's being put out there as a bluff to try and scare ordinary people into staying silent, not talking with each other about what's going on, not emailing articles back and forth, not visiting certain websites. And it's a repeat of the bluff that the Nazis did on the German people, where they deliberately crafted this image of the Gestapo, where they were omniscient and they saw everything, heard everything. They could virtually read your mind. And there was no getting away from them. So I really do think there just isn't enough computer power, manpower to make sense of all that data.
Yeah, because I've been trying to make sense of this. I mean, ever since Trump came in, I mean, there's been this whole propaganda, bashing of him, and even in the last month. They've been picking on the banks up here in Canada, which they should do anyway.
Yes, they should.
Like we get some people in here that belong to the big banks in Canada get hit for like over $25 a month just for service charges, just to allow them, to cash their checks because they have direct deposit or whatnot. And then they come out with this, and I'm thinking to myself, why would they admit this? Why? Why would they do this sort of thing other than to try and scare us into exactly what you said, obedience? But, I mean, in my mind, this works the exact opposite way. Like, I want to go up to Ottawa.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
A couple of million other people and throw these bums out of power.
It's not working very well here either because it is making people very angry. Again, going back to this poor girl who was driven to suicide by this sexual blackmailer over the internet, the only reason this guy was able to break into her webcam in the first place are all these back doors the government has mandated be in our machines. And people should be rightly angry. I remember that big stink a few years ago where a school was supplying laptops to students that had webcams, and then it came on out. The laptops had special software that allowed the school administrators to spy on the kids in their own bedrooms, and you can imagine what they're watching. And it really is nonsense out there. We are being treated like we're property. We're being treated like we're livestock, where they feel they have a right to listen to us and watch us all the time, to decide for us what we're going to eat, what we're not going to eat, what medicines we may not take, what medicines we're forced to take. We're being treated as property. We're not being shown the respect due to a human being, and certainly a big...
We're the ones paying the bills.
Yeah. Well, that's all we are to them. We're walking wallets. We're walking wallets and baby-making machines.
You got it. Thank you, Mike.
All right.
I appreciate your time.
Thanks an awful lot. Charlie from Los Angeles, welcome back to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, okay. Hey, I just got a little tidbit of trivia on Adidas. It was those evil Nazis that sponsored Jesse Owens by giving him a pair of Adidas. It was Adolf Dassler. He was a card-carrying Nazi. back in 1936.
Okay.
And after the war, well, you know, the Nazis went into France and they nationalized all the property. And then after the war, the property was returned. And now who owns Adidas is Julia Louise Dreyfus of Elaine Bennett's fame of Seinfeld. Her and her brother. They're the great-grandchildren of Louis B. Dreyfus of France. So it was the evil Nazis that sponsored Jesse Owens. They gave him a pair of Adidas.
Okay.
First spiked shoes for the long-distance race.
Well, my goodness, that certainly backfired on them.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I'm just saying is, you know, I don't think the Nazis were as bad as people try to make them out to be.
No, I don't think anybody in history is either as bad or as good as history tells us they are, because it's all being spun for political gain.
Yeah, well, the Americans didn't sponsor them. They didn't want anything to do with the blacks, but the Germans didn't have a problem with it.
Well, unfortunately, Adolf Hitler did, because it put a real dent in his Aryan superiority agenda. So anyway.
Yeah, but he had all those Muslim SS officers, remember? I don't think Hitler hated the blacks. I don't think he was a white supremacist. He killed more white people than anybody.
Hang on. I don't remember Hitler having Muslim SS officers. He had some Jews in there, but not. I don't remember there being Muslims.
There was plenty. Hey, Mike, you better check out your history. There was plenty of Muslim all the Muslim countries were flying the swastika and wearing it on their arm. You better check your history.
All right, well, I'll take a look at it, but I haven't seen that before. Anyway, we're going to let you go. Mateus in Canada is back. Mateus, please keep it short. What's on your mind?
Yeah, they call us human resources. That's what their official title is for them. And I think that they're planning on replacing us as much as possible with robots that don't have civil liberties and can't rebel and everything. You had that great caller about the vaccine reaction. He figured out that if it's injected into the bloodstream by accident, that could give the reaction, which could explain a lot.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make one last comment. You were talking about civil forfeiture the other day, and you said that it's analogous to the medieval times when the king's horsemen would come riding in and take the grain and the pigs. Well, back then they wouldn't dare take more than 10 or 20%, or it would be like pitchforks. And nowadays, we let them take 40, 50%, and we don't do anything. And,
well, you know,
you recommended that.
I don't think it's necessarily a function of numbers. I think it's a function, again, going back to the Declaration of Independence, people are disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable. And if you're making a good living and the government is taking half of it, and the half that you have left over is still enough to have a comfortable life, people aren't going to complain. You know, but if you are just barely getting by month to month, anything the government takes is going to be a source of anger.
Yeah, definitely. And I watched your recommendation video, The Little Dot, on YouTube, and that is so good. I'm telling everybody to watch it. I put it in my email signature, which, by the way, if anybody wants to promote Michael Rivero, you can just make a little link in your email signature, and it goes out. Thanks, Michael. Have a great day. All
right, thanks an awful lot here. We're going to switch over to George in San Francisco. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. You know, we're not even human. We're not even human resources anymore. We're now human capital. Human capital management is the new term. So it just seems to get worse and worse. You know, when any government becomes what is the term? You know, when we have the right, inalienable right to alter or abolish bad government, we've got to really own that thing. We own that right. Got to walk around every day with knowing that you own that. That's your right, and that's when I think we begin to start taking action. When these government agencies do more harm than good, I think we've got to start demanding that they're eliminated. Either clean up their act or you're going to be eliminated. And we look at the NSA and what it's doing, specifically this center in Utah.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're at the point where they're really doing more harm than good, aren't we?
We're definitely doing a lot of harm. I mean, the NSA isn't actually finding any real criminals or terrorists, neither is the CIA. They're spying on law-abiding Americans to make sure we're not thinking those double-plus ungood thoughts.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm thinking that maybe we ought to demand that they rededicate that massive data collection center to something positive like basic research, maybe modeling on a molecular scale what's going on inside a human cell so we can learn more medically. Something like that. And we get more good out of the money we've already spent on projects like that. The only other point I wanted to make was you and I both go back to a time when computers had their operating systems in read-only memory.
Yes.
Like, I think the Amiga did. I know the Atari ST did initially, and the original Apple Mac had a lot of its operating system in read-only memory. With the ST, they were all based on the same microprocessor, the 68000 Motorola. The ST had an actual cartridge slot.
Yes.
We went back to our computers having a cartridge slot where you could just unplug the operating system and then plug it back in, and you can't write to it. And it's open source, and the manufacturers weren't afraid of it publishing what it was because they owned the chips. Wouldn't we be a lot better? Wouldn't we be able to do away with a lot of this potential damage from a lot of the I mean, you wouldn't eliminate all of the damage that hackers could do, but couldn't we eliminate a great deal of it?
Well, we could, but because of all the government-mandated backdoors, that's why they don't want you to look at the code. That's why you're literally banned by the Digital Millennium Copyright Act from even looking at the operating systems in your computers, your appliances, in your cars, and we keep finding out that they're just full of security holes. We're dealing with a policy of mandated surveillance on the American people, and the consequences of it are simply not a factor. Now, one of the cool things about the Raspberry Pi, of course, is that you can burn the operating system onto a micro SD, or you can, in fact, have it burned onto something a little bit more permanent as well. The Amiga actually had software operating system. There was a bootloader in the ROMs on that. Like the Commodore 64 and the Apple II, the operating system was in read-only memory. And it didn't mean that there wasn't malware out there, but it was a lot easier to find and track down because the computers weren't designed to facilitate concealment of malware as they are today.
Right. It was a lot easier to take down. It was a lot harder for malware to destroy your operating system.
Well, it wasn't impossible, but again, if you had backups, you know, that would do that. But there was malware. I remember I did a little work very briefly at a company that was designing games for the Amiga. I was actually an Amiga developer. And they had a little game that was a space shuttle simulator called Challenger. This was before Challenger blew up. But
I remember that program, yeah.
And unfortunately, the master disk that they made to send to the duplicator and packager had a virus on it. They didn't bother to reformat it before they copied the game onto it, and so it went to the duplicator with a virus on it. And the aftermath of that just drove the company right out of business.
Okay, well, thanks, Mike, and have a great day.
All right, same to you. We're going to switch over to Nick in Southern California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Mateus called in twice. I figured I'd call in twice today, too. That last caller talking about, you know, putting our foot down on these government agencies that are hurting us and things like that. You know, Cliff High was out there saying that Iceland, you know how they jailed their bankers, and one of the biggest reasons they were able to pull that off is because Icelandic people are basically just as Icelandic people. They don't have a bunch of different types of cultures. They have one culture, and were therefore able to move in one direction with the bankers.
Yes.
And I think that's part of the whole idea of all of the immigration to mix us up so we have no identity. It does take away our ability to move as one population.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was one more thing. I sent you an email last night on the T-45. You talked about it, and the supposed strike in the Navy fighter pilot instructors. And apparently they have a source that says, you know, the official number is about 45% of the instructors went on strike, but supposedly the Navy saw this coming and put, you know, a lot of people off of work that day so they could deflate the numbers. The reality is it's about 75% of those instructors that went on strike, supposedly, according to a source.
Okay. But again, the point we're making here is the condition of our military is not very good. War is very rough on the hardware. It's not really built to last a very, very long time. They basically war game out. If they develop this kind of a platform, its reasonable life expectancy will be this before it's blown up or shot down, and that's what they build it to. Because anything past that adds weight that may actually shorten its lifespan. So we have been at war all over the world solidly since 2001. That's 16 years. And our stockpiles are drawn down. Our existing military hardware is worn out. And the new weapons that are being built continually turn out to be junk. F-35, F-22, the Gerald R. Ford, and on and on and on. We are not in a good position to be forcing a confrontation with Russia and China. And if they actually start a war with Russia and or China, I predict we're going to lose it, and badly.
Well, I think you're correct there from everything I've been hearing about. I think this is like the military-industrial complex's version of planned obsolescence. Why are they spending billions of dollars on hardware that doesn't work? I just don't understand it.
Well, that's the Cold War thinking. They spend all this money. Actually, they put most of it in their pocket, but they spend it on these weapons that don't really work, and they rig the tests to get it passed, because the theory is the Cold War will remain cold, and most of this stuff will never actually be used in combat. It'll wind up in museums and air shows and various things like that, and that's part of the whole scam. If you look at all of the stuff that was built during the Cold War of the 50s and 60s, the vast majority of it was never actually used in conflict, and a lot of it is now sitting out at that boneyard in Arizona just corroding away into the dirt. And that's the same thing going on now. I think a lot of these projects that we're seeing today, like the Gerald R. Ford, were being planned and put together before anybody was saying we might actually have to fight a war with this stuff. And now, of course, we have naval experts who are saying the Gerald R. Ford may never actually be usable or survivable in a real combat situation.
Well, the Pentagon might think that we're idiots, but they're not idiots. They have to know that if they're going to push a conflict of any kind, really, but a major conflict, we're going to be throwing our boys and girls at the enemy with terrible weapons. We're going to die.
They don't care. They don't care. They don't care. All right, got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Last segment, and my apologies to the callers who were holding. We ran out of time. Call in tomorrow. Some of you had some very good talking points that we wanted to mention. Now, going on back to the last call that we did take, the planners of war, you need to understand their mindset. The planners of politicians who go to war. The deaths and disfigurements aren't a factor. Remember what Henry Kissinger said about military people are just dumb, stupid pawns to be spent for foreign policy. And if you look back at the history of the original M16 rifle, you will see just how this callousness will manifest. Now, the company Armalite developed the M16 as a replacement weapon. When the Pentagon announced they wanted to update the standard issue military rifle, and Armalite submitted their design, and there was a rival design that was going to be the M14, and a lot of the Pentagon brass were invested, had good relations with the company producing the M14, so they wanted that one to be selected. And their rationale for choosing the M14 over the M16 was that it used exactly the same ammunition as the M30 machine gun, therefore logistics would be simpler. And what they did is they conducted a field test in Vietnam where they issued some soldiers M16s, and here's where it got crooked. They put the wrong propellant into the cartridges for the M16s. And the propellant they used fouled the gun and jammed it. And they were literally finding dead soldiers with dismantled M16s around them. And so they said, well, obviously this weapon won't work in the real world. And Armalite found out what had gone on. They went to Congress. Congress actually had an investigation that revealed that there was an economic motive in these Pentagon procurement officers, and they were willing to let these kids in Vietnam get killed for the sake of their stock portfolio. And the Congress literally ordered the Pentagon to go with the obviously superior M16 design and to make sure the ammunition had the correct propellant in it. And obviously it was a good design. It's still around. It's evolved, but it's a very wonderful system overall. The civilian version is called the AR-15, and the AR, contrary to the gun grabber propaganda, does not stand for assault rifle. It's a designation from the original Armalite company that designed the weapon. That's where that comes from. So, I mean, that's the attitude. People in power literally are oblivious to the pain and suffering they cause to those beneath them. That's part of the sociopathic personality, and unfortunately, sociopaths do have a wonderful gift for finding their way to positions of power, wealth, and influence. And we would be nice if we had some kind of a laboratory test that would reveal a sociopathic personality before they got to that position, but we don't. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and get on with the rest of my day here. We'll be back tomorrow, Thursday, here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, please make a point of taking what you find on the website, what you learn here on the show, share it with everybody. Keep pushing on the Susan Rice spying on Trump story. We can't let the corporate media distract from it or make it go away. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.